yesterday.
Hello there, John Reed, Aero Dinosaur. Parked right behind this scale Air America C-123 is my on-mark B-26K Counter Invader, one of Air America's contemporaries in Southeast Asia. I'd like to pull it out of here to give you a little bit better look. You have to be careful. The Counter Invader was a very unique 1960s conversion of the pre-existing Douglas B-26 Invader attack bomber. It was designed as a much improved counter-insurgency aircraft to be used in irregular guerrilla warfare conflicts that had become prevalent worldwide in the 1960s. Its use was first with the CIA using Cuban rebel crews in the Congo in the mid-1960s, and then more extensively for U.S. covert night missions over Laos, as flown by the United States Air Force, based out of Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, also known as NKP, under the Nimrod call sign until retired in November 1969. I built this model, which represents one that flew out of NKP during that time with the nickname Mighty Mouse, which you can see painted on the side of the nacelle here. I built it from a limited edition kit in 2006, and a very few of these replicas can be found today. However, they now command a price of nearly $100 per copy. Here's a widely circulated photo of the actual Mighty Mouse firing up its engines at NKP prior to a mission over Laos in 1969. The visible improvements in the K, which we'll go into more detail in a minute, included an engine upgrade from the B series to the more powerful C series 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, wide paddle blade propellers, permanent wingtip tanks for additional fuel, a lengthened rudder, which I had to modify myself because the kit left out this feature, strengthened wing spars and underwing ordnance hard points, and a change from single to dual controls through the addition of a control yoke for the co-pilot, as well as stronger landing gear. The original B-26 Invader had the second longest frontline wartime service of any heavy piston propeller warbird. In addition to numerous wars and skirmishes in between, which we'll touch on in a moment, the B-26 fought with the U.S. Army Air Forces in late World War II in both the Pacific and European theaters, as well as Korea, and in the early years of the Vietnam conflict into the mid-1960s with the U.S. Air Force and the CIA. The early Vietnam operations were under call signs Jungle Jim and Farm Gate. Only the Douglas C-47 transport matched and exceeded the B-26's battle longevity in the large piston propeller aircraft category. After World War II, many countries besides the U.S. flew the Invaders in numerous conflicts around the globe. The French had the largest fleet. Other non-U.S. operators included Brazil, Turkey, UK, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Nicaragua, Peru, and Indonesia, and nationalist China, among many others, as you might expect. The French were known to fight them in the Indochina and Algeria conflicts during the 1950s. The United States CIA fought with them in Indonesia in the late 50s, Laos, and in the Bay of Pigs operation in 1961, and in the broader Southeast Asia theater until 1967. Ironically, both sides operated the B-26 against each other during the Bay of Pigs, as Castro took over those B-26s previously operated by the Batista regime, and Cuban rebels crewed those CIA planes. The Air National Guard retired the very last military B-26s in the U.S. in 1972, with the last foreign-operated military B-26s retired around 1980. Several restored examples of the original B-26 Invader continue to fly the airshow circuit to this day.
I can stop right
In general terms, the original Invader had an empty weight of 22,850 pounds and a maximum takeoff weight of 35,000 pounds with a wingspan of 70 feet 0 inches. The B variant had 6 50 caliber machine guns in the nose, and the C had a clear plexiglass nose in place of the 6 guns to provide visibility for a bombardier. It should be noted that the various militaries operated numerous ancillary variants of the basic B-26 Invader in the post-World War II era, most commonly as target tugs and reconnaissance platforms, and civilian operators used them as firebombers, such as this one that was flown by Conair in Canada. Numerous corporate concerns also flew B-26 conversions in a wide range of roles, such as executive transport, aerial mapping and photography platforms, surveying platforms, and equipment test platforms. During World War II, the Invader was not designated B-26, but A-26, denoting attack. It's important that for the moment that you consider this first Invader as the A-26. It entered United States Army Air Force service in the Pacific in 1944, and in Europe later that year, displacing the Martin B-26 Marauder medium bomber, which was the first B-26, and the Douglas A-20 attack bomber until the war's end in August 1945. Here's where the designation confusion enters into the equation. The Martin B-26 Marauder, a medium bomber, had difficult and dangerous flying characteristics. Twice as many of these were built during the war compared to the A-26 Invader, and because of its bad flying characteristics and resultant high training mortality, the Martins were rapidly retired after the war. The original Douglas A-26 Invader, with about the same payload limit, had more pilot-friendly handling characteristics and was considered pleasant to fly, almost like a fighter. After the Martins were retired, the Douglas A-26 Invader was redesignated B-26 Invader, leading to what seems to be eternal confusion with the Marauder, which first flew almost 2 years before the Invader. While both were powered by very similar B-series R2800 engines, they were completely different airframe designs by different manufacturers, and after the mid-1940s, the official designation B-26 referred to the Invader, not the Marauder. However, with the on-mark B-26K Counter Invader, the designation confusion continues, as you will see shortly. The original B-26 Invader utilized the B-Series R2800-79 of 2,000 horsepower. Variants of this B-Series engine also powered aircraft such as the earlier Vought F4U Corsairs, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, the F-6F Hellcat, and also earlier variants of the twin-engine Curtiss C-46 Commando transport. Out of 2,503 B-26 Invaders built from 1942 into 1945, work on 40 U.S. Air Force sanctioned on-mark conversions began in 1963, mainly out of boneyard inventories. Similar improvements, common to both military and civilian conversions, had already been made with earlier on-mark and other B-26 civilian executive conversions. The main improvements with the military B-26 Counter Invader are as follows. The most important change was replacement of the B-Series R2800-79 with the redesigned, more robust and powerful water alcohol injected C-Series R2800-52Ws pulled from military C-118 transports. This increased takeoff power from 2,000 horsepower each to 2,500 horsepower, along with higher cruise horsepower. These were low-time or remanufactured engines, as the R2800Cs had been out of production since around 1960. The C-Series ran much more smoothly with a distinctive deep singing sound as it flew by, rather than grumbling by, like the more primitively counterbalanced B-Series, as demonstrated by a flyby sound comparison which you will see and hear later in this program. In addition to the 4-engine C-118 and its civilian DC-6 counterpart, C-Series variants powered aircraft such as the later Vought Corsairs and Republic Thunderbolts, the Grumman F-7F Tigercat and Grumman F-8F Bearcat, and later C-46s, as well as the Martin 202s and 404s, the Convair 240, 340, and 440 series, and their military T-29 and C-131 counterparts, the Fairchild C-123 Provider, and the Canadair CL-215, which used remanufactured engines, like with the B-26K, except the CL-215 was a clean sheet aircraft where production started several years later than the K. The R2800 B series and R2800 C series parts were not interchangeable, even though they were manufactured simultaneously on parallel production lines during World War II. You might have noticed the differences in nose case design and cylinder design. B cylinder heads were integrally cast with the cooling fins. C cylinder heads were forged with finer cut cooling fins, resulting in stronger cylinders with better heat transfer or cooling qualities. There were many internal differences far beyond our scope here, but we should point out that the C series received better second order counterbalancing, resulting in smoother operations. Other changes included replacement of the standard thinner blade propellers of the original Invader with thicker paddle blade propellers similar to the DC-6s, Martins, and Convairs to better harness the increased power. These were surplus C-118 propellers, though the prop tips had to be cut down slightly to allow ground clearance for the prop, which was still a short 8 inches. The original Invader air scoop was on the leading edge of the cowl, as seen here. This often caused overheating in humid tropical climates where the K operated. This air scoop modification, performed on many but not all Ks, was called the Congo modification. The air scoop was moved all the way back to the firewall area behind the cowl at the cowl flap line. This allowed cooler air to enter the carburetor in hot and humid tropical conditions. The airframe structure was beefed up, including stronger main wing spars and wing hardpoints for external ordnance. Maximum wing ordnance load was increased 130%, from 3,500 pounds to a whopping 8,000 pounds of rockets, bombs, flares, canisters, and removable gun pods. This is amazing because later in its life, the original B-26 Invader had an unpleasant history of in-flight wing failures due to fatigue. For counterinsurgency missions, the internal bomb bay was used mainly for crew ingress or recon cameras, and not for internal bomb loads. The bomb bay, if it were used, could still carry its original 4,000 pounds of ordnance with the full wing ordnance as well. This means that total ordnance load, including wing and internal bomb bay, actually increased from 7,500 pounds to 12,000 pounds. Permanent wing tip tanks were installed for 165 gallons additional fuel each, or 330 additional gallons total. The rudder was enlarged, giving the vertical stabilizer a more evenly squared profile compared to the original Invader. Stronger brakes were also incorporated using KC-135 tanker components. As mentioned, the definitive Invader had only one control yoke for the pilot on the left side, but with the K, a second yoke was added for the co-pilot to afford dual control. When I built this K, I sealed the cockpit, unfortunately, before I realized I forgot to install the second yoke. So for 13 years up to now, I thought I had a slightly inaccurate rendition of this plane. As you will see in a moment, my error never really mattered as far as accurately modeling this aircraft was concerned. The K Counter Invader had a wingspan of 71 feet 6 inches versus 70 feet 0 inches for the original Invader due to the new wing tip tanks. It had an empty weight of 25,130 pounds and a maximum gross weight of 43,380 pounds compared to a maximum gross weight of 35,000 pounds for the original Invader. The definitive K had 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns in the nose. To paraphrase what one pilot allegedly said while picking up a new K from the on-mark factory in Van Nuys, "It smelled like a new Volkswagen. It flew like the basic Invader, but more solid and powerful." Operators of the on-mark B-26K Counter Invader included the CIA in the Congo uprisings during the mid-1960s using U.S.-friendly Cuban pilots and crews. Only 5 B-26Ks, all in the non-camouflage paint schemes, were employed there, along with original non-modified B-26 Invaders. The U.S. Air Force accepted its first Ks in April 1965 and first deployed a few of them in Panama that year. The Air Force then deployed most of them in Southeast Asia from spring of 1966 to November 1969. Prior to May 1967, they were stationed with several squadrons at several bases in Southeast Asia. In May 1967, the aircraft were concentrated at NKP, Thailand, and were assigned to the 609th Special Operations Squadron under the call sign Nimrod, as previously mentioned. They were charged with covert night interdiction operations over Laos to disrupt North Vietnam's massive supply line to the south along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, as well as against Laotian communists over the plain des Jarras. The top-secret NKP airbase was also home to the Air Force A-1 Sky Raiders, who faced combat over Laos similar to the Nimrods, under call signs such as Hobos and Zoros. The Sky Raiders also participated in downed aircrew rescue missions under the call sign Sandy, providing air-to-ground cover for the Sikorsky HH-3E Jolly Green Giant rescue helicopters. U.S. casualties were extremely high for these particular missions. Somebody had to provide coordinates and other targeting data for the Nimrod, Zoros, and Hobos missions, and this responsibility fell on the forward air controllers, who were also based at NKP. They flew aircraft such as the Cessna O2 Skymaster, the North American OV-10 Bronco under the Nail call sign, and the C-123K under the Candle call sign. The Candle C-123Ks also served as flare ships for night combat operations over Laos. The C-123 also handled transport duties in and out of NKP. The NKP-based Counter Invader added even more B-26 designation confusion. It was first designated B-26K, but with the basing of them in Thailand, the Thai government had a political dilemma. They didn't want U.S. bombers based in their country for media political reasons. Accordingly, the United States Air Force redesignated the B-26K back to the A-26A, A meaning attack, not bomber, enabling them to base at NKP. However, unofficially, the A-26A was still referred to as the B-26K. Is that confusing enough? Up to 26 B-26Ks were delivered to NKP, and 12 were lost in combat or non-combat accidents in Southeast Asia. As these were covert operations, crews understood that any heroism or ultimate sacrifices made, which were considerable, would not be publicly recognized. The subject aircraft of this video is the Vintage Flying Museum's B-26K, appropriately named Special K. She was first introduced on the airshow circuit in 2018 after many years of restoration efforts at their headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. We filmed our featured operational footage at the Spirit of St. Louis Airport Airshow, St. Louis County, Missouri, on September 6, 2019. This is the only restoration of the B-26K Counter Invader since its retirement from Southeast Asia 49 years earlier, and the museum is certainly to be commended for this. Since my becoming aware of the B-26K in the early 1970s, I had reasonably assumed there was no way in hell that the world would ever see a flying example of this rare and otherwise unknown aircraft ever again. This is one time that I was very glad that I was wrong. The subject B-26K of this restoration, named Special K, serial number 64-17679, never left stateside after its manufacture. It was used for crew training in Florida only, so it doesn't have a combat record. It was retired to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in October 1969 when it was determined that there was no military future for this aircraft in the U.S. In the 1970s, it had been acquired by a civilian concern and ferried to Georgia and later to Montana after a crash landing repair in Georgia in stillborn attempts to convert it to a firebomber and later a museum restoration. In 2005, it was finally ferried to its current home in Fort Worth, Texas, now called the Vintage Flying Museum, where it was painstakingly restored to the flying condition which you are about to witness.
I've read about it and I've written articles and stuff on this.
Bombing trucks on the Ho Chi Minh trip.
Right.
I thought things, honestly, I thought things were really underground and I didn't know I was.
Put in ADSB for them, which everybody has to have by.
What's that?
It's it takes care of the old.
You're using more gas. Thanks for letting us come up.
Well,
come on in.
I just have to quit my volunteer job. And that was the last thing.
Behind it, huh?
I went to the Air Force in 76.
Oh, I see.
These guys were 6'6".
Yeah. Yes, they retired him in '69, right?
Yes, sir. Actually, the Air National Guard kept them in about 72.
So did you? I thought they had mounted another yoke over here. Did you just remove
They
it?
do. I got it sitting right here.
Oh, you just removed it?
Yeah, that's why I was apologizing.
Oh, I see. I didn't know.
I'm working behind the instrument panel. I got a cooling fan on this
Yeah,
garment over
I
here.
didn't know they could do that.
The cooling fan's got a ground wire in there now. I got the two.
I'm going to do this way and then this way, and then I'm going to get out of here.
Got a good starter on it. Good battery too.
At this point, I thought it might be interesting to compare the different sound signatures between the R2800 B series engine and the more advanced R2800 C series, utilizing two flybys, the first of a B-26B Invader and the second B-26K Special K.
That'd be a nice spot so you can go to that trailer. We don't see me for 20 minutes.
Retired from Southeast Asia's service in November 1969, most B-26Ks were ferried to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base for storage into 1970. It's rumored that up to 5 stayed back with the Vietnamese Air Force or moved to Nha Trang, South Vietnam, and operated by the CIA into the early 1970s, but there's no reliable information to confirm this. In May 1987, when I took these photos of a decaying B-26K near Davis-Monthan, I was convinced that this was the first, last, and only time I would ever see a B-26K in person. I was fortunately wrong, because 32 years later, this would change drastically for all us enthusiasts, as you just saw.